Hokie Hangover, live on YouTube Thursday night, 9:53 p.m. Live on YouTube, youtube.com/at Hokie Hangover podcast. Here to preview Virginia Tech and their 5-4 record, taking on the number 23 Clemson Tigers. Clemson coming to town off of a loss to Louisville. Clemson's first loss since their opener against Georgia. Virginia Tech, of course, it comes as no surprise for any of you who watched the game last weekend or listened to our recap the other night. The Hokies are coming off another loss. It's Syracuse. Really, really fun one. Virginia Tech welcomes Clemson to town. We were anticipating this to be a much bigger game, to be honest with you, much bigger game heading into the season than this is ending up being on paper. But the one thing I will say is that even going up until last weekend, if Virginia Tech had won that game against Syracuse and Clemson had taken care of business against Louisville, this would be a fairly significant game on Saturday at Lane Stadium. It is no longer that, at least on the national stage, but this game on Saturday offers an opportunity for Virginia Tech and Brent Pry and the staff to try to get back into the good graces of this fan base because of how that game really went down last weekend and how things went and how things have gone this season. It would be interesting if Virginia Tech found a way to go ahead and win this game, Ricky.
Interesting, for sure. Shocking, absolutely. I don't know what your opinions are on the likely part of it because I would say no. But this is
Yeah.
Clemson's an interesting team. They got throttled in the opener by Georgia. They have since played a bunch of nobodies. I don't know if anyone has looked at this schedule that Clemson has played. Mike, I don't know if you've looked at this schedule, but I know that you follow Clemson on a weekly basis on the Basketball Conference podcast, which, if you don't listen to that, throw that into your rotation. Mike's on there every week. Um, for those that are listening, folks, the Tigers have played App State, NC State, Stanford, Florida State, Wake Forest, Virginia, and Louisville since losing to Georgia in week one. Mike, that schedule is awful. That schedule stinks. So Clemson got hot there for several weeks, and to their credit, they were playing really good football, but they weren't really being tested. And the first time that they were really tested since losing that opener to the Bulldogs, they lost at home. So, do I think Clemson is better than Virginia Tech? Yes, I do. Do I think they are miles better than Virginia Tech? No, I really don't. Do I think Virginia Tech is going to play up to their potential in this game? No, I really don't, considering what we've seen from the Hokies every time they play somebody with a pulse. So,
Yeah.
this is a really interesting game for the two fan bases. Mike, you mentioned this game doesn't really matter much for the national landscape anymore. Clemson is now begging for help to get to Charlotte. They have to win out and then have things fall their way. Virginia Tech was, as we all know, thought to be a potential dark horse for the ACC championship, and they're now fighting for bowl eligibility, which is beyond frustrating. So Virginia Tech now has an opportunity to take on a Clemson that is not quite as good as folks probably thought they were at the beginning of the year. But as we know about the Hokies, Virginia Tech is also not as good as we thought they were at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, we're going to find out a lot about Clemson here in the month of November. Obviously, the opener was ugly, primarily the third and fourth quarter. I thought Clemson played a pretty decent first half of football against Georgia, and then it kind of fell apart. Offensively, it looked like more of the same. And then I think the thing that made things appear to be different with Clemson's offense in particular in the games leading up to last weekend's loss to Louisville is that, yes, even though Clemson had not played really a lot of quality opponents on that schedule, they were rolling through them in a way that Clemson's offense really, in particular, has not in quite some time. Like, this team was winning by multiple touchdowns, leaving no doubt in every single game they played up until Louisville last weekend following that Georgia loss. Now, I think what we're going to learn here over the next few weeks, because this is Clemson's toughest part of the schedule, losing that game 33-21, that really, to be honest with you, last weekend, that final score isn't really
Not all that
indicative.
indicative of how close the game was.
Right. Like, this was like this was 33 to 13 or 14 in the fourth quarter. I mean, Louisville kind of rolled them, and Clemson played awful. Like, they played their worst game of the year, and I think what we're going to learn is the worst game of the year, period. Like, I think they played worse against Louisville than they did against Georgia even. We're going to learn if, Clemson is kind of a product of their schedule, sitting at 6-2 and 5-1 in the ACC, or if they just played a bad game last week. I expect Clemson to play better against Virginia Tech, but Clemson also is only a touchdown favorite for a reason. I think Vegas looks at this game kind of as confused as we are about what Clemson is. Are they the team that, the country saw for, I don't know, the 6 games leading up to that Louisville loss, right? Or are they actually more like the second half team we saw against Georgia and the team we saw the entire game against Louisville last weekend? I think that's the question we're going to find out. Clemson's got Virginia Tech this weekend on the road. They head to Pittsburgh next Saturday. Then they have the Citadel, and then they have a home game against a good South Carolina team, which obviously has no impact on the ACC race, but will have some national implications for Shane Beamer with the way that South Carolina team's been trending here recently. So, really interesting Clemson team. I mean, they're better than they've been the last couple of years. Obviously, they're a clear step below the national championship contending program that they were in the back half of the 2010s when they were
Probably
winning
a
a couple
couple
national
steps,
titles.
actually.
Yeah, but are they still a really good team? We're gonna find out. This is the best team Dabo's had in probably 4 years.
And they're
But
still not War Machine Clemson from several years ago.
right, and the fact that we're talking about them in this context with the questions that we have about them probably tells you everything you need to know. Now, the question about whether or not Virginia Tech's going to be competitive here is another thing. Virginia Tech's done this thing where in the Pry era, where obviously they've lost a lot of close games, but they've also done this dance where they've been competitive for points of games where we weren't necessarily expecting them to be. I think specifically, obviously Miami this year is an easy one, but even like last year, Virginia Tech hung around that Florida State game for a while, you'll remember, and we were a little bit surprised by how that game was going. I don't think either one of us or Andrew, we weren't looking at that game thinking, "Oh, Virginia Tech's going to win, going to win this game in Tallahassee." But I remember watching that and thinking, "Okay, Florida State kind of rolled the helmets out, and Virginia Tech came to play a little bit." And wow, this game is a little bit closer than I anticipated early in the third quarter. And then, of course,
Yeah,
Florida
after
State
the
hit the gas, and that was that.
Tootin
But
had the kickoff return for a touchdown, but I mean, this is something that we've seen from the Hokies under Brent Pry throughout his tenure thus far. They tend to play their best football when they get left for dead. We kind of saw what happened after the Rutgers game. They go down to Miami, they play a really good game, and again, we've said it 1,000 times. You can argue about whether or not they won or lost it, but besides the point, Tech played one of their best games of the year when everyone had kind of written them off after the Rutgers game.
yeah,
We saw it at times last year where folks thought that they were done and they would turn around the next week and win by 2 touchdowns. So this is a team that, as maddening as they are and as inconsistent as they do tend to play their best football when people don't really think they have much of a chance. And I mean, you would be hard pressed to find anyone that's going to put Clemson on upset alert this week. I know that they lost last week, but Clemson's probably going to be more focused than they were last week. They're definitely going to be locked in. Dabo whipped their ass this week in practice. So those guys are going to be motivated to right the ship. And I think the ultimate question that we're going to probably come to an answer to here in a little bit by the end of the preview is Virginia Tech's best game good enough to beat Clemson? And based on the inconsistencies that we've seen on offense and defense from Virginia Tech, I'm just not sure that it is.
That's interesting because I think if Virginia Tech plays like it did against Miami, I think they're going to be right in this game with a chance to win, right? Like,
Maybe.
yeah.
It's hard
Now
to
I
know
wouldn't bet
because
on it.
a lot of it goes back to what do we think of Clemson, and are they, did they just kind of, because again, a lot of your non-elite teams will have those one or two clunkers a year, and that certainly might have been the case for Clemson last week, or it could be evidence that they are a product of their schedule, which has been so easy.
Right. No, I agree. I think there are almost more questions entering this game about Clemson than there are about Virginia Tech from a
Yeah,
from a national standpoint.
I feel like I have enough data points that match up at this point that Virginia Tech is just another mediocre, inconsistent football team. And
Right.
sometimes they're going to play okay football, and other times they're going to make you want to pull your hair out.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of in between. It's a wide range of outcomes for Virginia Tech.
Yeah.
For Clemson, I think there's a lot of data that says that this is a good team, but that data is a bit skewed considering their opponent. And then the two times that they've played semi-competitive teams, and one of which is an elite team, they got the doors blown off them in the second half in that game, and then they somehow find a way to lose by two scores at home
Yeah.
to Louisville. That Louisville hasn't even looked all that good this year. They've played good football at times, but they've also made a lot of losing plays when it matters.
Yeah, I mean Louisville is by far the most competent team that Clemson has played since or had played since Georgia. And like you said, Louisville's got their flaws. Like they've gone into games and they've screwed around, they've turned the ball over, they've had special teams gaffes, penalties have been an issue. Like Louisville's had some problems this year. But Jeff Brom said it. He feels like he still has a really good team when they're not shooting themselves in the foot. And they played their cleanest game of the season last weekend. They blocked two kicks. The special teams have been a bit of an issue for Louisville. They go out and they block two kicks against Clemson.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we're going to learn a lot about Clemson, I think, here. And for Virginia Tech, it's like, what version of the Hokies are you going to get? And is that version good enough, right? Which is the question you just posed. And I don't know. I don't know the answer for sure because the way Clemson's schedule has laid out, it's led us to wonder, okay, were they a byproduct of playing like six bad teams, or did they just play one bad game last weekend, and that's going to be their clunker in league play this year, and then they're just kind of going to roll through the rest of their schedule. They're going to win the next couple in league. They're going to meet the Citadel and then set up for a big showdown against South Carolina to finish the year. We're going to find out, but is Virginia Tech's best game good enough to beat Clemson? I think the jury is still out, right? Going into last weekend, I thought that Clemson had an opportunity to go to Charlotte and give Miami some issues because Miami's done this thing where, they've messed around. Their defense is mediocre. But I think what you said in our last podcast, Ricky, Cam Ward's kind of inevitable. Like the offense is ridiculous.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they have the best offense in the country in several metrics. I mean, they are extremely explosive. Cam Ward could very well win the Heisman Trophy. They have a really, really good team, and they've just been able to hit the gas pedal. But with the way Clemson was rolling heading into last weekend, I was kind of wondering whether or not Clemson was actually the best team in the ACC. Now I'm not so sure after how they played against Louisville and after Miami's comeback to cover the spread after being down 11 in the second half against Duke last weekend. So Clemson no longer controls its destiny to try to get to Charlotte. They need to win out, and then they need some help, right? SMU needs to lose at least once, and then Clemson needs to win some tiebreakers. That's essentially what's going on there.
Yeah.
So we'll see. They're effectively out of the college football playoff race, though, and I think it'll be really interesting to find out, what this Clemson team is the rest of the year. Now, as for Virginia Tech, will their best team showing up be enough to beat Clemson? If they play a game like they played against Miami, is that good enough at home to win this football game? And the one key difference looking at Miami versus looking at Clemson's defense is a whole hell of a lot better than what Virginia Tech played in Miami on that short week back in early October. A lot different.
I agree.
I think that's the one key difference here when, if you're looking at this thing in a vacuum and you're like, all right, if Virginia Tech plays kind of like it did against Miami, is that good enough? Well, circumstances are going to be a little bit different here in that I think Clemson's defense is a lot better, right? In fact, I think Clemson's defense is probably the best unit on the field on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, they can rush the passer. They play good on the back end. They did give up quite a few rushing yards last week to Louisville. They gave up a couple big plays. So they are vulnerable, but they probably are the best unit on the field on Saturday.
Yeah. I mean, they're on the Virginia Tech side offensively, we'll see about Drones and Tootin.
Well, that's and that's another part of this too. Which, I mean, last week was it was frustrating for many reasons. One of which was finding out that morning that Drones wasn't going to play, and I know that these coaches, and we're kind of getting off the tracks here, but I know coaches have no incentive to be upfront and honest about their players' injuries.
Right.
But I'm so sick and tired of the gamesmanship. Virginia Tech, like just the NCAA or whatever organization is running this sport in 10 years needs to find a way to get the injury reports to be accurate. The NFL has been able to do it.
SEC is doing it.
Yeah, the SEC is starting to do it now, which is nice. So let's find a way to figure that out. But that's besides the point. If Drones and Tootin are healthy, which is a big if, considering Bashal Tootin was probable last week and then didn't see a single snap.
Now is questionable.
Yeah, now he's questionable and Price saying he's got a good chance, what the hell ever that means. Even if those guys play, you don't know what their health level is. You don't know what they're going to be able to do. We have seen Tootin tough out an injury already this year, playing with that knee brace for a few weeks, and he was still finding ways to be productive. But this Virginia Tech offense, as we've said, Mike, for several weeks now, runs through Tootin in the running game. And they were able to make it work last week against a pretty vulnerable defense at Syracuse. Something tells me that Colin Schlee and Malachi Thomas and Jeremiah Coney are not going to be able to have the same kinds of success against the Tigers on Saturday if they're the ones that are getting the ball. So Virginia Tech certainly needs Tootin, I think, to be able to win this game. I think it's a slim chance, but I think there's a shot they can win. If Drones is out, I would obviously prefer to have him in. But Schlee, for all intents and purposes, played pretty decent on Saturday. Not bad for not really getting much prep work.
Agree. Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I also think there's a big difference between going up against Syracuse's defense and going up against Clemson's.
Yeah, it's very different, night and day.
Yeah, and coupling that with the fact that, it's unlikely that the combination, like you just mentioned, of Schlee and Malachi Thomas and Jeremiah Coney play as well as they did last weekend. Just opponent aside,
Yeah.
there's more film out now, right,
Yep.
of how the offense looks. The offense looked different, right, with Schlee in there. The running game looked different with Malachi Thomas and Jeremiah Coney. Less of that outside zone run that Tootin has perfected. Obviously, there's not as much inside quarterback zone run just because Schlee is not as big as Kyron Drones. So we're not just taking him and getting him downhill. That's not to say that Schlee can't be athletic outside the pocket and run, because we did see that last weekend against Syracuse, but the running game just looks flat out different with Drones in
Yeah.
there. It's totally different with Drones and Tootin, by the way. But yeah, the film is out and this is a better defense. So it's unlikely that if you have Schlee out there for a second consecutive week and you don't have Bashal Tootin, it is unlikely they're going to play as well as they did last weekend. And that's before you even add in the quality of opponent that is just different, right? The defense is different for Clemson than what Virginia Tech just faced in Syracuse. So that doesn't mean that Bowen can't still scheme stuff up. Bowen's done a great job the last month, like really getting Virginia Tech and their offense in favorable opportunities. I thought he had a great game plan with Schlee last weekend. I thought Virginia Tech did what it could on the ground and was pretty effective running the football in the first half especially, and then at times in the second half. I think there will be some stuff schemed up here, but I don't know if it's going to be enough over 4 quarters if you don't have Drones, and especially if you don't have Bashal Tootin. So you'd rather have those guys than not. Clemson's offense. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, just before we kind of tie the knot on this Virginia Tech offense, whoever the hell is going to play quarterback on Saturday, whether it's Drones or Schlee, have got to find a way to hit some throws downfield. This has been a missing component of the Virginia Tech offense for several weeks. This is something we saw a little bit last year when Virginia Tech got hot during the second half. They were able to find some of those throws downfield to Daquan Felton, Jalen Lane. We haven't really seen that much this year. Ollie Jennings has been mostly missing. Daquan Felton hasn't been nearly as productive this year. A part of that, I think, is on Drones, and part of it, I think, is on him. But Virginia Tech has just not found a way to stretch the field this year. And when you're going to face a team like Clemson, that's something you're going to have to do. You're going to have to find ways to get some big plays, because Virginia Tech simply just does not have the firepower to be able to slowly grind out drives against a defense like Clemson.
Yeah, totally agree with that. Virginia Tech has lacked explosiveness in the passing game really all season, right? I mean, it's just not looked as good in the passing game this year, I think, as we were hoping, with what Virginia Tech returned at receiver and what we were hoping Kyron Drones would be, right, in his second full year as a starter. It just hasn't really materialized this year in the passing game the way that we hoped, especially in terms of explosiveness in the passing game. Virginia Tech, when they're on defense here, obviously the Hokies are coming off of their worst half defensively of the season with the implosion.
One of the worst halves of football from a defense that I've ever seen.
Yeah, it was really bad. And there's no question about that. It was really bad. We talk about whether or not Clemson played its worst game last weekend, right, against Louisville. I think the same question can be asked about this Virginia Tech defense, because even when we've had questions about this defense in the past, like even dating back to last year, it looked just totally incompetent from like basically the second drive defensively of the second half onward. It was totally incompetent the rest of the way, to the point where you're almost like, man, could this get any worse? And is it repeatable? Now, I think we know the answer about whether or not it's repeatable, because last season we talked about this defense and its propensity of giving up explosive plays. And in a lot of ways, that second half last weekend really mirrored the issues that Virginia Tech had within each game it played defensively last year. But it was almost like that game last weekend was almost like a microcosm of Virginia Tech's issues when they've been at their worst defensively on like a drive-by-drive basis this season, right? It's like, okay, well, Virginia Tech's done a much better job giving up like not giving up explosive plays defensively. They've found a way to like slow things down and keep stuff in front of them, especially in the running game heading into last weekend. And really, for the first half, I thought Virginia Tech's defense played really well last weekend.
Yeah.
But then Syracuse started hitting explosives in the running game with the Quinn Allen. Obviously, McCord made some throws. Virginia Tech's defense, I think, will want to get that bad taste out of their mouth here. And they're doing so against a good Clemson offense, I think, that, again, coming off of their worst game, I do expect Clemson's offense to play a lot better on Saturday. But
Not just a good Clemson offense, but one of the best running backs in the conference.
yeah, Phil Maffa's really good. I mean, really, really good. And even in that loss last weekend, he still ran for 171. He's had games of he's rushed for 100 yards or more in 5 of the 8 games at Louisville that Clemson's played this year. He's really good. Hard-nosed, between the tackles runner. He's got a burst at the second level that makes him really, really difficult to bring down, right? Because he's tough between the tackles, but then he can kind of hit that extra gear.
Mm-hmm.
He's been really good. Klubnik has been much improved as a passer this year. He's really taken that step forward.
Taking care of the football for the most part.
Yeah, and Clemson's found they found some explosiveness in the passing game, in the downfield passing game this year that's been missing since Trevor left. And it hasn't always been there, but it's been there in a way that it really hasn't been over the past 4 years. So they're hitting on some more explosive plays in the passing game this year. It has been improved, but this is a Virginia Tech defense, I think, that if you're able to slow Phil Maffa down here and get after Cade Klubnik, I think there are some opportunities to get some stops against a very good Clemson offense, no doubt about it. But it all starts with getting stops against Phil Maffa in the running game.
Yeah, and is Virginia Tech able to generate any turnovers in this game? I mean, this is one of those games where Virginia Tech is going to have to find points on the margins. They're going to have to force a couple turnovers. They're going to have to make a couple special teams plays, whether it's downing a punt inside the 10 or blocking a kick or returning a kick for a touchdown or even just a big return punt or kick. It doesn't really matter. They're going to have to find ways to win this game, not straight up. I don't think Virginia Tech can win a game against Clemson where they don't make those kinds of plays. That's just who Virginia Tech is right now. At the beginning of the year, I might have thought a little different. I might have thought this offense had more firepower. I thought that this defense would be a little bit more consistent. That just hasn't been the case. So how can Virginia Tech make up some of those margins? Can they force a couple turnovers? Can they find a way to maybe get a strip sack and flip the field position? I mean, they're going to have to find a way to do something of the sort, because I do think that, kind of to borrow a term that we referenced tonight and I used about Cam Ward, Phil Maffa feels a little inevitable as a running back, and he's going to get his to an extent. Now, is he going to dominate the game? Well, if Virginia Tech plays like they did last week, yes. Yes, Phil Maffa is going to have a field day against a team that couldn't stop LaQuint Allen. So we'll have to see how Virginia Tech plays, if they're going to be any better in their run fits, if they're going to be more physical up front. They did a horrendous job tackling in the second half, especially the DBs and the linebackers. Those guys are going to have to be really, really on their game in this one, considering Maffa is much bigger than LaQuint Allen, much more physical than LaQuint Allen, and really is one of the better backs in America.
Yeah, Virginia Tech's faced some pretty good backs this year, but I think there's a decent shot that this is the best one they've played. And depending on what you think of Mark Fletcher and Damian Martinez at Miami, or Kyle Monaghan at Rutgers, this is, or even Jamal Haynes at Georgia Tech, there's a pretty good chance Maffa's the best one out of several good running backs Virginia Tech's played this year. So it's really going to be important to stop the run here. Clemson's receivers have been better, as I mentioned, this year, but I think Virginia Tech's DBs, coming off of a bad second half last weekend, I think the defensive backs here for Virginia Tech if you got to put him on an island against some of Clemson's receivers, while I do think Clemson's receivers are improved, I do think Virginia Tech's defensive backs actually stack up quite well here on paper if they basically just don't throw up all over themselves like they did last Saturday and
Man,
play like they
rough.
usually do. Like don't have a Mansour Delane. I mean, Delane had a really rough second half last Saturday. Don't have that kind of performance. Don't have the Mansour Delane Vanderbilt performance, and you're probably going to be okay on that side of the field. Don't have the up and down Dorian Strong performances that we've been accustomed to seeing. Just play good, consistent football and make Clemson beat you in the passing game, right? Klubnik is a good quarterback. Gives him an element in the running game. He's been
Yeah,
sharp.
I was
He's
just
been
about to
sharp and
mention that.
accurate. But I think his accounting for him in the running game in this game, I think, is almost as important as what they're able to do in the passing game. Just because I think Virginia Tech's defensive backs match up pretty well on paper against Clemson's receivers, I think it's almost more important that you account for him in the running game here.
Yeah, the pass rush needs to be really, really good in this game, and they're going to have to find a way to keep him contained. He's got probably the best rushing stats of any of the quarterbacks that Virginia Tech has seen thus far. And when you have a quarterback that can do a bit of both and is able to beat you downfield and take care of the football while also extending plays with his feet, generating yards on the ground, that's what Klubnik has been, and those are quarterbacks that are really, really hard to stop. So, Antoine Powell Ryland, this game is for you. You need to find a way to make an impact here. Same goes for those guys in the interior that 2 weeks ago against Georgia Tech we were lauding, like Wilfred Panay, Aeneas Peebles, Josh Fuga. Those guys are all going to have to find a way to stay in their rush lanes and not get beat by a quarterback that is more than mobile and more than capable as a runner.
The concern I have in this game is, can Virginia Tech's linebacking core play disciplined football? Clemson does a lot of that misdirection stuff in the running game, and they also roll Klubnik out quite a bit. My concern here is that, and it's been a while, and Virginia Tech's defense has had plenty of good performances since this game. So I want to bring this up just from a scheme standpoint, not as much like, has Virginia Tech cleaned this up, because I think they have. But you remember back to that Rutgers game that Virginia Tech lost, and they kept running that same like drag play with their tight end over and over and over again, and
Yep.
it was kind of just like that. Can you get a Virginia Tech defensive end or linebacker to bite on that quarterback rollout, and can you be disciplined enough to like play your keys and just like not go after the quarterback, because he'll just like just dink and dunk a pass over your head? And they ran that same concept over and over and over again in the passing game, and they spammed it, and Virginia Tech wasn't disciplined enough with their linebacking core defensively to get stops. I'm concerned in this game because Klubnik is such a weapon in the running game, and he does pose issues in the running game in a way that Virginia Tech really hasn't seen from a quarterback since then. Georgia Tech, I think, could have been that, right, if Haynes King was right, because obviously the element of Haynes King's legs, come into play a good bit in that offense. But if you look at Virginia Tech's opponents they've played since Rutgers, and the way that Calic Manis like ran that offense, Virginia Tech really hasn't seen a quarterback that can really threaten them in the running game like this in quite a while. Like, truthfully, maybe since Pavia in the opener. Stanford didn't have that. BC didn't have that with Castellanos. They try to run him, but he's he's like 5'8". So it's like, you get in the second half, and yeah, they like to do that with him, but he
He's
just gets banged
also
up.
nowhere near as effective as a passer as Klubnik
Right,
is.
right. I mean, Klubnik is, outside of Cam Ward and Pavia. I mean, Klubnik is probably the best quarterback Virginia Tech's played. I mean, the Hokies didn't face Haynes King,
Yeah, I was
and
gonna
it
say
depends on what you think of McCord.
Tech's had the benefit of playing some backup QBs this year, and
Mm-hmm.
I mean, no one's gonna write home about Ethan Manis and
Right,
and what he can do at
right.
quarterback. So yeah, the level of quarterback play that Virginia Tech's defense has seen is just not really all that high, and they were able to keep McCord contained through the air in the first half last week, but just total coverage breakdowns, bad tackling, the whole 9 yards in the second. Uh, if Tech comes to the field with that kind of performance in this game, which I don't think they're going to play that bad on the defensive side of the ball,
Right.
but if they do, Clemson will put up 50. I mean, they have the weapons on the outside. They have the
Yeah.
running back that can continue to churn out yards. They've got a quarterback that takes care of the ball and can push the ball downfield. This is an offense that can certainly get you if you allow them to. And
Yeah.
like I said, I don't think Virginia Tech's defense will play down to the level that they did in the second half last week, but I do think that they are going to give up a decent amount of points in this game.
Yeah, I do too. It's fun to play bend but don't break defense until you play an offense that is good and can put up
Especially good
points.
in the red zone and can
And
run the football consistently, which
right.
teams that run the ball well usually are really good in the red zone.
Virginia Tech's defense needs to force turnovers here. I agree with the comment you made about Virginia Tech's not going to play this game straight up defensively and win. I think they do need to force some turnovers. Offensively, I think Virginia Tech, obviously, a lot of this depends on the health of who's playing, who's not. I think Tech needs Drones and Tootin to win this game. I don't think they win this game with Colin Schlee and a combination of Thomas and Coney in the backfield. It's one thing to do that and put up 31 against Syracuse. It's another thing to play Clemson's defense. Even at home, like I just don't. I have a hard time seeing that.
Interesting note on Clemson. Touchdown percentage in the red zone, they're 90th. So they are not as good in the red zone as you may have expected.
Well, they've had some bad games in the red zone and just finishing drives in particular, right? Like that Florida State game.
And you also wonder about their kicking operation after last week.
Yeah, I mean, what the hell was that? I mean, that was really bad.
This would be a really good time for a blocked kick for Virginia Tech. I don't remember the last time Tech blocked one. This would be a good time for it.
Yeah, agree. Game management stuff would be good here from the coaching staff. Like good game management. It's been a while since we've done that. That would be good to see.
You mean it's been never since we've done that?
It's been
not with the staff.
Effectively, like next time will be the first time, kind of. Yeah.
I mean, it's rough when you can't recall the last time Virginia Tech executed a 2-minute drive or inside of 2-minute drive to perfection.
Yeah.
One, the passing game just hasn't been there, but number two, that they've just been so bad at clock management this year, and their inability to adjust in game has been really, really frustrating and mind-boggling. But the coaching, Clemson has an obvious coaching advantage here. I know that.
I'd say so.
I know that it's fun to like poke fun at Dabo and talk about how he can't get any transfer, doesn't want any transfers, and his program isn't as good as it was a few years ago. But if there's one thing that Dabo can do, it's his coach football teams. And the guy didn't win a couple national championships for no reason. So people can hate on Dabo all they want. That's fine. But Clemson has the clear and obvious coaching advantage here, which doesn't make me feel very comfortable about picking Virginia Tech on Saturday.
It shouldn't. We'll get into our picks here in a second. I think we can roll into our ACC picks now. I don't have any. Do you have anything else on this game? There's nothing else. I think I've exhausted everything I wanted to talk about.
No, I mean, the one thing I was interested in getting your opinion on, Virginia Tech has 3 games left, including this Saturday against Clemson. They have a bye after this week. Now that we're doing the whole 2 bye week season, which is weird. So Virginia Tech's off next Saturday, then they go at Duke, and then they're back home after Thanksgiving against the Hoos. So for these 3 games, Mike, how many does Virginia Tech need to win for you to feel happy going into bowl season?
3.
Yeah. All right.
3.
I'm
The
glad we're on
answer's
the
3.
same page there.
Yeah, the answer's 3. I mean, they got to win all 3 for me. And Andrew, I think, mentioned this, and I thought it was a good point. I made the comments about the coaching staff on the last podcast. I stand by what I said. Like, I'm out on this staff until further notice. I will continue to support the team and support the staff and hope things turn around. But, like, I've lost confidence that this is going to work out, and I'm open to them changing my mind just because they're not going anywhere anytime soon.
Yeah.
But the point that Andrew made, I thought, was a good one, where he made the comment about, he's not out on because, like, the season, there's still 3 games remaining. But, like, assuming Virginia Tech loses to Clemson and they are an underdog, and let's say Virginia Tech goes out and wins the last 2, which is, like, far from a certainty. Let's just play that out, right? Virginia Tech's going to be 7-5 going into the bowl game.
Yeah.
And it would be great for Virginia Tech to win the last 2, maybe be competitive this weekend and lose that. That would be fine, I guess. But then you're still going to be sitting here at the end of the year with a 7-5 record thinking that Virginia Tech underperformed this year, right? So really, it's going to take Virginia Tech winning the final 3 games, finishing the regular season with an 8-4 record with a chance to win a 9th in a bowl game for me to be like, all right, like, this season didn't go how we wanted to, but the floor going into the year we thought was probably 7-5, and Virginia Tech found a way to go 8-4. Was it disappointing? Yeah. Were some of the losses annoying? Yeah, but, like, this was an inconsistent football team. You found a way to win 8 in the regular season with a chance to win a 9th in a bowl game. It's still some progress even amid some disappointment. But if this goes how we expect it to, right, and Virginia Tech loses on Saturday and then plays out the final 2 games, best case scenario is 7-5 going into a bowl game, that's a really disappointing season. And in a lot of ways, with the way some of these losses have gone, 8-4 is going to be disappointing for some people just because of the way some of these games have gone and what has led to these losses.
Yeah, I mean, trying to take a 30,000-foot view on this. If Virginia Tech is able to go 8-4 with a win over Clemson, a win over a much improved Duke team, Mike, I know you think they're awful, but I think
They
Duke
are.
is. I don't know. I think we differ on that one. That's besides the point. Duke, in terms of record, has been pretty decent this year, and then they're able to beat UVA to finish the year. I think fans would feel relatively good, especially considering where we're at now. Now, do they have a right to be disappointed? Absolutely. I think this team certainly had a schedule that they could have gone 9-3 with. The roster, you would think that they could have gone 9-3 with. But if you're able to end the game end the season on a 3-game win streak, one of those is against Clemson, another of which is against an upstart team that's won a lot of games this year, and the other is against your in-state rival. That's at least something you can pitch this winter about the progress of your program. But yeah, Mike, if you go 7-5 and then you lose the bowl game and you finish with the exact same record as you did last year, with all of the returning players on both sides of the ball,
Yeah.
that's not selling to anybody.
No.
Nobody's buying that at that point, especially when you consider next year's roster and what that looks like currently on paper, which is very young at a lot of key positions. Young on the offensive line, young at wide receiver, young at running back, young at defensive end, especially young at defensive tackle, young at cornerback. I mean, you're going to be very, very young next year. So you really cannot afford to finish the year with the same amount of wins as you had last year. We talked about it before the season started, Mike. This was Brent Pry's best shot at 9 or 10 wins that he's probably going to have over the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
Because of the confluence of seniority on the roster, transfers that we expected to be filling key roles on this team, this was his best chance. And he's obviously not going to get to that threshold right now. So 8 wins, I think, is critical. And even then, you're going to have a section of the fan base that, rightfully so, is not going to be all that happy.
Yeah, college football is one of those few sports where the whole thing of like you are what your record says you are doesn't really apply just because everybody's schedule is so different. But the one thing I will say is like there are differences between what Brent Pry did last year, going 7-6 and winning the Military Bowl, right? And if he finishes with 7 wins this year, like those are two different 7-win seasons. You know what I mean? Like there's a 7-win season last year where you're coming off of a 3-8 year one, and of how looking at how Virginia Tech improved, understanding that there were still some holes on the roster last year, and Virginia Tech was young at a lot of positions a year ago, but had some veteran leadership on that team still and some seniority. But you think of like Kyron Drones, first full year as a starter, Bayshell Tootin, first full year in the offense. There are things you could point to where you're like, all right, they're incorporating a lot of new guys in from the transfer portal a year ago. And there were ways to kind of explain away some of the early season poor performances, and there were just less data points, right? Now you go into this year and bringing all that back in your roster and finishing with a 7-win season would be really disappointing. And then to just play this out a little bit further, Ricky, right? Going into next year, you just mentioned the youth that's going to be on this roster across the board, and Pry will certainly attack the transfer portal and try to remedy some of that at some positions. But like Virginia Tech on paper next year, right now, as it stands, looks pretty young. And so like would a 7-win season or an 8-win season next year be all that disappointing given what we know about the roster right now? No, probably not, right? So that's the whole thing of like the 7 and 8-win seasons are created equal. But this was Brent Pry's best shot at winning 9 or 10 games for a while, I think. And you just mentioned that as well, which makes the way things have gone this year even more disappointing. And it's put him on tenuous ground with the fan base. And the option is not fire everybody because it's just not realistic. But this staff has underperformed so far, and they got to find a way to turn it around. I think winning the final 3 games and winning a bowl game and finishing the season with 9 wins would go a long way towards doing that. So anyway, let's get into our ACC picks, and then we'll come back and pick this game at the end like we always do. Cal is traveling to Wake Forest Friday night. If you want something sick to watch, Cal is a 7.5-point favorite. Totals 54.5. Cal is still looking for its first ACC win, Ricky. They are without one. They beat the absolute piss out of Oregon State last weekend, and I'm interested to see if they could carry that forward to an ACC game against an opponent that I think they're better than.
Mike, what did you tell us several weeks ago?
I ramble a lot, so I could have said pretty much anything.
Mike tried to tell us several weeks ago that there was an outside shot.
Oh my God!
In week 3, Cal Golden Bears, who have yet to win a game in the conference, could find a way to Charlotte.
Oh my goodness,
Mike, not your best take. Just going to throw that out there.
That was after they beat Auburn and San Diego State. Since then, they've lost 4 games by a total of 2 points, 3, 4, and 5. They've lost all 4 games this year they've played by a total of 9 points. 9 points.
Well, Mike, you know what? What have we said on this podcast the last couple of weeks about the Hokies? Bad teams find ways to lose. Give me the Deeks. Especially their home dog, 7.5. Yeah, give me Wake Forest.
Cal.
To cover?
Yeah.
Okay.
Cal.
Mike's like, I got to ride with that take.
I have to. I mean, I have to now. I got to defend myself. I have to. I have no choice. Miami taking on Georgia Tech in Atlanta. Miami, an 11-point favorite, going to Bobby Dodd.
Is Haynes King healthy?
They don't know.
Damn it.
They don't know, and they don't know if Zach Byron's going to play either.
This is the thing, man. Like Miami is the kind of team that like normally they got to lose at some point. Someone has to knock them off at least once. But they've played with fire several times this year and been able to
They
get
have.
out of it already. It's possibility, Mike, that the
Mm-hmm.
team that could knock them off is in a few weeks, and a team that we're familiar with after last week.
Mm-hmm.
Besides the point,
Yeah, it's a
if
road game for him too.
if Georgia Tech doesn't know who the hell's going to play quarterback, and they may end up having to go to Aaron Philo, which, by the way, was moderately impressive in the time that he played against the Hokies. Give me Miami to cover at 11 points.
Yeah, I agree. Give me Miami
All
minus 11.
because really of Cam Ward, guys.
Yeah,
Inevitable.
yeah, lamb with Miami. By the way, two bad defenses here. Like, so even if it is Aaron Philo at quarterback for Georgia Tech, I would still bet the over because I mean the way he looked throwing the ball down multiple scores against Virginia Tech, he
Did
can
you
hit
lock
some
that
big
up
plays.
last night?
I did lock up the over.
Nice.
Yeah. That's one of my favorite bets of the entire weekend is
Okay.
over 63.5. The overs in Miami games have been profitable.
Probably.
Not
I was gonna say probably making really good money betting over on Miami.
pretty profitable. I've hit some overs on Miami games this year. Number one, because their offense is so good, but number two, because their
Their
defense
defense
has
is not very good.
not fantastic. Yeah, they've given up some big plays.
What are the
Uh,
odds that in a like college football playoff game we're gonna see Miami in like a 50-45 game?
yeah, that's where I think the defense comes and finally bites them in the ass. I'm not
Like
sure it's going to happen.
if
in the
Miami ends
ACC.
up playing a team like Texas or or Alabama in the playoff, I'm not sure Alabama's gonna make the playoff, but
That would be an over game, by the way.
yeah,
I've seen some. I've seen some college football playoff projections that have Miami in as one of like the or have Alabama in as one of the final at-large teams, which would put them in a game like this where they're playing against Miami in like a quarterfinal after a bye.
imagine
And
Ryan Williams against that secondary. Jesus.
dude, imagine Cam Ward throwing against that Alabama secondary, dude. Bet the whatever the over is. There are
Yeah.
not enough points. There are not enough points that would make me consider betting the under in that game. Anyway, I think that's where it bites my. I've mentioned this. I think that's where it finally comes back to bite Miami in the ass. Right, the defense.
Yeah.
I think it's going to take until the playoff. I'm not sure there's a team left on the schedule. Weird things have happened. Like stranger things have happened with Miami. Obviously, they could go out and lose this weekend. They could find a way to lose to Wake Forest. That would be really funny. They could lose to Syracuse. They're going to be favored in the hypothetical ACC title game against SMU that would be played if the season ended today. They'd be favored in that game. I think where it really bites Miami is in the playoff when they play one of these like really good to elite teams. I think that's where it finally gets them. Syracuse traveling to Boston College. Boston College a 2-point favorite. Noon on the CW. We're leaning into the underdogs. Give me Syracuse. I think the wrong team's favored.
I agree. Syracuse should be favored in this game. Maybe some reverse psychology here from Vegas, given that this is on the CW. But give me the orange.
I tried to go against the CW underdogs with the Hokies last Saturday, and it looked good for a half, and then it didn't. 3:30 ACC Network. Duke taking on NC State. NC State a 3-point favorite. Give me the Wolfpack.
Man, you noted Duke hater, Mike McDaniel.
Give me the pack.
Well, I've blown enough smoke up their ass. I got to go with the Blue Devils
Gotta
here.
go with them now. Yeah,
Yeah,
you gotta go with them now.
I know that they gave up 50 against Miami, but everyone gives up 50 to Miami almost, except Tech. So that Duke defense, I still think is good. Give me the Blue Devils to win that game. Not just be able to win within or get within 3. I think they win that outright.
Win outright. Yeah, I could. I mean, hell, 3-point game, pretty much coin toss. NC State,
Yeah.
you're getting 3 points for playing at home. I mean, that'll be a fun one. Florida State 7:30 NBC. Florida State and their 1-8
This
record
is
traveling to South Bend
this is
against number 10 Notre Dame. Notre
this is
Dame needs
annoying that this game is. This should be your CW game, Mike. This is your CW game right here. Jesus Christ!
Notre
Stop
Dame
putting
is
Florida State on in prime time.
Notre Dame is at home, so of course they get the NBC game. Notre Dame is a 26.5 point favorite. I am laying them with the Irish. They need style points. Florida State is awful. But if you want to call the hotline bet, I got one for you,
Oh
Ricky.
God!
I got one. You ready?
Are you
I
gonna
threw this
tell
one.
me under 42.5?
I'm going. That would be disgusting. But I'm going to tell you something even worse. Even worse. Florida State team total over 7.5. You ready for the rationale?
Where did you find this bet?
Are you ready? Are you ready for the rationale?
Oh my God!
Florida State. There's a pretty good argument that this Notre Dame defense is the best one that Florida State has played. The second best defense, or the best defense, right? If you don't think Notre Dame's the best one they've played, is Clemson. And Florida State found a way to score 13 points against Clemson. And if you watch that game, you'll remember that Florida State was like going for it in the second half, like trying to push the envelope and get themselves back into the game. They had some opportunities in Clemson territory. Florida State has scored more than its team total of 7.5 points in every single game they've played this year, even against the second best defense, or best defense, depending on how you look at it, what you think of Clemson. Even against Clemson, they scored 13 points. I think they're going to be able to score like 10 points here.
Mike, your degeneracy knows no bounds. None. Give me the Irish cover.
Yeah, Irish cover. Yeah, Irish cover. They need style points. I think they get them.
Fade the Knowles until further notice.
Yeah, that, by the way, that's also been profitable. You're asking me for like a couple profitable things, like betting Miami overs, and then betting basically anytime Florida State plays, just betting spread against them has been good. 8:00 ACC Network. Virginia traveling to number 18 Pittsburgh. Pitt is a 7.5 point favorite. Lay 'em. I think this is a bit of an overreaction to Pitt's really poor goose egg performance against SMU, where they just did not. They totally no-showed last week. I think they play a lot better at home here.
Virginia's a weird team. Got off to a hot start, right? 4-1. But as we predicted, the schedule got incredibly difficult. One of the most difficult schedules probably in the conference this year.
Yeah.
For the Hoos. Louisville, Clemson, Carolina, all L's. They got ran over by Carolina. Pitt's the better coach team. I think Pitt's got the better quarterback. I do think Pitt rebounds. I will take the Panthers to cover at home.
Good pick. We agree. We've been agreeing a lot tonight on these picks.
Yeah, I think the only one so far is the Duke one.
Yeah, and Cal Wake was the other, I think. But that's fine. That's fine.
As Andrew Alex would say, and he'll laugh at this when he listens to it later, don't doubt Duke.
Don't doubt Duke. That's what he always harps on. Don't doubt Duke. Clemson coming to Blacksburg. Tigers are now a 6-point favorite. Game opened at 6.5. It was 6.5 when I previewed it on my ACC pod. It's come down 0.5 point. Regardless, Clemson is about a touchdown favorite here. I'm gonna go first. Without knowing the health status of Kyron Drones and Bashal Tootin, it's really hard to what oh good, New King God's here.
Yes.
He's in my ACC pod comments.
Yeah.
Sorry. The obsession with Miami, let the hurt go. What are you talking about? We've every time I've talked about Miami tonight, I've said good stuff about them. I don't know what do you want me to do? They're the 4th ranked team in the country. They have the best offense in the ACC by far. They're at worst a top 3 offense nationally. What do you want me to say?
They're good as they are in the field, Mike. Worst fan base in the conference.
Yeah. What are we talking about? You know who will never
Anyway,
make the playoffs? Virginia Tech. Yeah. Okay. Thanks for joining us. Hit the subscribe button. Clemson. This is
while
this is
you're
not a
at it, go
Miami
to home
podcast.
field. Use the
Go to home
code.
field. Yeah, promo code BeamerBall. 15% off your first order, please. Thanks for listening, New King God. Seriously, appreciate it. Just please hit subscribe. Without knowing the health status of Bashal Tootin and Kyron Drones, I can't pick Virginia Tech to go out and win this game, right? Like I think the perfect scenario for Virginia Tech to win this game, pull off the upset, would be for both those guys to be healthy, and for Virginia Tech to play a game similar to the one they played against Miami, and hope that whatever offense they're able to put up against a better Clemson defense would be enough, right, relative to what Virginia Tech was able to do against Miami against a worse defense, right? Miami's defense is worse than Clemson. Sorry, New King God, worse than Clemson. I think I think Virginia Tech can hang around here for a bit, because I do think there's a path defensively where if you're able to slow down Phil Maffa and limit Cade Klubnik's impact in the running game and make him a passer, I do think Virginia Tech's pass rush here can get home a few times to Klubnik. And I do think Virginia Tech's secondary on paper holds up pretty well against Clemson's wide receivers. We'll see if that plays out in practice here. Virginia Tech's played better wide receiver groups than the one they're going to see this weekend, but Clemson does have some good receivers, right? We didn't talk about them like explicitly, but like Brenningstool is a good player. Wesco is a good player. Like they got guys who can definitely impact the game on the outside. I think Tech hangs around a little bit here, but I think at the end of the day, you're going to see Clemson's defense make just enough plays to really gain some separation here. And I think you're just going to flat out see the talent gap. You know, we talked about this in the Miami preview, right? We talked about the talent gap eventually showing out. And if you look at that second half, right, for Virginia Tech against Miami, the dam kind of broke against that Miami offense. And Miami's defense started to get some stops, right, because they do have superior athletes to Virginia Tech. And I think you're going to kind of be swimming up against that same current here against Clemson on both sides of the ball in the second half. I got Clemson like 31-17. I think they win this game by a couple touchdowns. And, you know, do I think that point spread could be a little bit different if Drones and Tootin play and they're like close to 100%? Yeah, like I think Virginia Tech could probably keep it within 10. I think there's a path to be a little bit more competitive than that potentially, and there's a path to covering the spread, I think, if those two guys play and they're fully healthy. But Virginia Tech has to play their best game here, and I don't think they're healthy enough, and just a lot of questions. I think Clemson's better than they showed a week ago against Louisville. I really do, and I think they played their worst game, and I think Virginia Tech is better than they showed the second half a week ago for sure. I don't think Virginia Tech will play that poorly again. So yeah, give me Clemson 31-17. Think Hokies hang around, but I think at the end of the day, Clemson just shows themselves to be a better football team.
Mike, what's the rule? Anytime Tech plays anyone with a pulse, they lose. So, going to be hard for me to pick Virginia Tech to win this game for sure. I certainly don't think they're going to. I don't think they're going to keep this within the spread. Cade Klubnik is having a really good season and a really good rebound season for his career. I think he's the best quarterback that they've faced outside of Cam Ward. I think he's going to get his through the air. He's going to give them problems on the ground. Phil Maffa is an incredible back. He's going to cause problems for this Virginia Tech defense that certainly gave plenty of film for Clemson to exploit this week. This offense, even if Kyron and Bashal Tootin are healthy, I still don't think that the offensive line is going to be able to play as well as they did a few weeks ago. This is the best defensive line that Virginia Tech has seen probably all season. They're going to struggle to open up the lanes in the run game. And as good as Bashal Tootin is, even if he plays, he will certainly not be 100%. He can't do it all on his own. So Clemson's going to win this game. I don't think they get blown out. but I don't think that they are going. I don't think there's going to be a point in this game, Mike, where we think Virginia Tech has a real shot to win. I would be pretty surprised if we get to midway through the third quarter and this is a one-score game.
Yeah.
So give me Virginia Tech, like, I don't know, 21 and Clemson 35, something
Yeah.
along those lines.
Yeah.
That's probably not a good pick because Clemson hasn't been all that efficient in the red zone this year, but maybe it's like 34-21. I don't know. I do think Clemson gets above the 30 mark. I don't think Virginia Tech is going to get to that point. And it's hard to predict that with as many injuries as Tech has right now.
Yeah, Virginia Tech continues to play like bend but don't break defense like they've been playing at home recently and forces Clemson to kick field goals. I mean, I think you are going to find yourself in a pretty competitive football game, but if you give up explosive plays here, I think you're going to have an issue. So
yeah,
I'm going to bet on Clemson hitting on one or two explosives. And I'm going to bet on at least one of Virginia Tech's key players not playing, whether it's Drones or Tootin. I'd be pretty surprised if both played. Just Pry's been hiding injury stuff, but I just don't. I don't know, man. Tootin seems like he was pretty hurt and obviously wasn't good enough to go last weekend. Seems like Drones got hurt maybe late in the week last week, which I don't know.
Well, Drones apparently got hurt against Georgia Tech and kind of gutted it out, and then essentially didn't practice the week before.
Yeah.
We just didn't know. But of course, both of those guys went through warm-ups, but then quickly took the pads off.
Yeah, if you're gonna bet this game, maybe
Which
just
is
wait
just
until we know who's playing.
agitating, but
yeah, maybe just wait until we see some availability if you're gonna bet this game. Yeah. All right, we both got Clemson. We'll see if how Virginia Tech plays here. I'm going into this game like with low expectations, but it's kind of like Miami in a lot of ways, like low expectations, but open to being surprised. And yeah, this would be pretty infuriating. I think Grayson pointed this out. Grayson Wimbish said it would be really infuriating. He'd almost be more mad if Virginia Tech found a way to win this game, which would be it was really funny. That was that went a little bit viral on the timeline. I thought that was pretty funny how that played out. In hell for winning football games. That's what the staff has done to us. So
pretty much. Before we wrap this up, Mike, tomorrow night Tech men's basketball has their second game of the year. I think we're going to hold off a little bit on the men's preview until we get maybe before the Penn State game. Honestly, it's kind of hard for me to get a good idea as to what this team is without seeing a little bit more basketball. And even the basketball we are going to see over the next two games between South Carolina Upstate and Winthrop is not going to be all that telling. So I think y'all can expect a men's preview here in the next week and a half or so. It's certainly on our radar, but I think given how different the roster was this year, I certainly wanted to get at least a sneak peek as to how they looked against some of these guys.
Yeah, I agree. We'll see. Just my 2 cents. A 500 season in ACC play, I think, would be a great year. That's where I'm at with the men's
How
game.
Exciting!
Fired up about that, especially coming off of a disappointing football season.
Can't wait.
We'll be back. We'll be back Sunday night to recap this. See how Virginia Tech looks. We'll give an update on how the basketball team looked on Friday, and hopefully we can talk about 2 wins. That would be fun.
Yes,
I wouldn't count on it. That would be fun. It'd be fun though. Be good. Rate, review, subscribe. Please subscribe to YouTube, especially. That would be really helpful for us. And we'll be back Sunday. Andrew should be back in the fold. He was traveling to Black. We had to hold off until Thursday for just scheduling sync-ups for all 3 of us, and then he was traveling to Blacksburg this afternoon. So he'll be back with us on Sunday to help us recap this game.
Yep, him and I will both be in town this week. So
and you'll both be in town for Clemson.
I'm heading up Saturday morning.
Say hi to Scott. Scott will be there. I'm sure he'll try to meet up with you guys and have beers. Okay.
I was going to say, I know exactly where to find him.
Yes. If it's anything like the Military Bowl, you'll know where to find him. or maybe he won't. Maybe he'll just be walking around the concourse looking for beer. We'll see. It kind of depends. he'll
was so
appreciate
funny.
he'll appreciate the ending of this. It was fantastic. Until next time, go Hokies.